Hi everyone, welcome. We're out here at my outdoor worm bag version 5.0, which just really means it's the 5th season I'm running in one of these outdoor worm bags. And it was even a 6th season that preceded the outdoor worm bags, which was me just running the outdoor overwinter system in this brown trash pail. But I didn't really consider that as the version 1.0. I've been, using the numeric, whatever, designation for the versions for only the bags. So now it's been 17 days since we came in here with the last feeding, and I guess since then we've been seeing quite a bit of leaves falling off the trees, and that's what we're gonna use to accompany the feeding as far as bedding goes. The stuff that I've got for them is a whole bunch of leaves of radish, as well as a cucumber from my garden, one that started to look like it was maybe not so good, so it's becoming worm food. I chopped it into 3 pieces because it was a pretty good size cucumber. I did actually make a comment during the last check-in how the feeding was perhaps a little more generous than usual, and that we might be able to wait a little longer between feedings this time. And then on top of that, I even came in here once or twice after I had been out in my garden collecting tomatoes, because I found a few tomatoes that just didn't really look as good as they could, and they ended up in here. So I figured between the fairly generous feeding they got last time we checked in together and the few tomatoes that I started throwing in here since then, that these guys should be just fine as far as food goes. So that's why we kind of waited a little longer than usual before coming back to feed them again. The system is now 199 days of age, and I did actually originally think that tomorrow might be the day we would come in here to commemorate the system's 200th day in service, but the forecast calls for rain tomorrow. And it seemed like, why don't we just come in here? 17 days is probably long enough for them to have waited for their next feeding. So that's the reason we're checking in on the system today, because it's a nice sunny day. And unlike a previous check-in where I had allowed the sun to illuminate part of the frame and really throw off the exposure, I'm doing my best to sort of sit in a way that I'm blocking the sunlight. Hopefully I'm doing a good job, because the really bright light is going to kind of throw off the camera and mess with the exposure and make it hard to see the actual subject matter. So I've been picking through the feeding zone here looking for leftovers of not only the tomatoes, of which there's only skins, but we also found a few corn cobs. And I don't know how long the corn cobs have been in here, but I figured if we're able to, why don't we just check to see if they're degraded enough to the point where maybe I can snap them using a single hand, because I'm trying to keep my other hand clean for operating the camera. And they did give, but they were pretty tough. That second one was pretty tough to break, so maybe in a future check-in they'll be a little bit more brittle and easier to break apart, but at least we were able to break them that much to help them along with the breakdown process. Oh, another one. I don't know if we're going to be able to crack it or not. Oh, this one actually feels like it's kind of allowing me to crush it, like chip off pieces of it. And it seems to me like this inner core of the corn is what the worms really like to eat, but for whatever reason this stuff is holding out and hasn't been consumed yet. I wonder if that might be because they're just more into other foods that are in here, or what. Sometimes it seems like they go nuts for the corn cobs and just gobble them up and rip the insides out of them. Other times it seems like the stuff lasts forever. So that was kind of interesting that we were able to extract that inner core, and now it's going to be right there for the worms to enjoy and gobble up without the corn being in the way. I mean the cob being in the way. I'm definitely bumping into the bottom of the system here. It's not a very deep system. What's this? This is some sort of a larger object, which I'm having trouble identifying. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. This is the half of a mango seed. Oh my goodness. Loud vehicle cruising by. I usually try to find the mango seed husks that I know are floating around in here. One of them was always kind of appearing without much trouble. We were always able to track it down pretty readily, and the other one was just very elusive and would never come around. And right now we're just, for whatever reason, only managing to bump into half of one of them. So there's still a mango seed husk and a half elsewhere in this bin somewhere that we just haven't managed to track down. So I think we've had a pretty good opportunity to see how some of the older foods that they've been getting over time have managed to break down. And when it comes to corn cobs, mango seed husks, those are the sort of things that are just going to take a long time. So it makes good sense that we're coming in here with foods that they're going to be able to break down a lot more quickly, such as the cucumber and the leaves of radish. So why don't we proceed to giving them their allotment of food. And wow, perhaps I came in here with a little bit more bedding material than I thought I had. Oh, look at that, we got a moth in here. Did that moth just land in here now, or was he in here the entire time? I'm not sure. I think it's out of frame. You're probably not seeing the little guy. Can I capture him? No. Too quick for me. I was unable to catch him. So I think we're kind of done with the exploration phase of our feeding and our check-in. Although I guess we could also sort of till up the outer edges of the bag to see how things out there look. Usually when the rain falls, it's the middle of the bag that's pretty well protected and doesn't get much moisture from the rain. It's usually the outer edges that get pretty soaked when the rain comes, and that's where I expect to see the greatest amount of moisture. Although, even considering that the center of the bin is protected with that plywood top covering, it does seem like the material that we excavated was fairly damp. So the system certainly has enough moisture in it to compensate for all those dry leaves that we just placed in. So I think we've got a minute or two remaining here where we can perhaps excavate a little bit around the edges just to see how things look, just to see if it's really that much more damp on the outer edges, or is it pretty much all the same everywhere. I guess even though there's a pretty good amount of moisture in here, the stuff luckily crumbles quite readily. The stuff we're seeing here is the skins of potatoes. Once again, a noisy vehicle driving by. Looks like a vehicle that's probably about 100 years old. It's like this really old vehicle. The people down at the end of my street have a couple of these really old vehicles that they drive, and they have these really loud exhaust systems. Yeah, look at all that beautiful casting material we're getting from around the edges. Now I'm kind of glad that we excavated, because now we're getting to see some of this really nice stuff that's starting to pile up. And it's also kind of nice to see that the worms are more or less exploring all of the material in the bin. I guess if the rain always falls and lands in the outer edges, and if that's where the most moisture is, it's not too surprising that the worms are gravitating towards that section of the bin. And over here, it seems like we've bumped into the other half of that mango seed husk that we saw earlier. So it's in here somewhere. I guess you just have to be persistent and keep looking, and everything will eventually come out in the wash. But we're not going to keep looking because it's not that interesting. I just figured we would mention it since it did surface eventually. And now I've leveled things off. I guess with all that leafy material that we placed in here, once the worms start breaking that stuff down and it begins collapsing, the level, at least in the middle, is probably going to drop considerably. Although we did fluff the entire contents of the bin up at this point, so it'll all settle once all the air gaps start to collapse and so on and so forth. But either way, as you saw, it didn't take much to get to the bottom. It's not a terribly deep system. I mean, I folded over a good bit of the material. Well, not even that much. A little bit of the bag has been folded over, so it's not quite as deep as a normal grow bag is. But still, it's a fairly large diameter, and it is a pretty large capacity system. I do classify it as being among my larger systems. So, it does seem like we picked up a good bit of damp material by it sticking all over my gloves. But that's okay, I'm not going to worry about it. Let's get back these top covering pieces of paper that you saw out here in the beginning. These things are definitely making progress. The worms evidently come up and nibble on this stuff whenever they get a chance or are craving for cardboard. And I've thought about it a couple times that we might just submerge all that stuff down within the bed and let it just become additional bedding. Perhaps at some point in the near future we'll do just that, but for now it still seems like it's holding up good enough to serve as sort of a top covering to go beneath our ornate plywood top covering. It's interesting, this time we didn't see any sort of evidence of an invader creature. Sometimes some little visitor comes by and pokes its little claws down here and excavates a bunch of material, presumably in pursuit of a nice high protein worm snack. But over the past 17 days it seems like we haven't had that sort of an invader coming by to check on things. Perhaps the way we propped the plywood cover up high prevented them from reaching it. Perhaps they did come over here, reach down, were unable to get their little grubby claws on anything and left empty-handed. So maybe our efforts to keep them out have been working. All right, everyone, that's it for our check-in. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.